can see that our numbers have increased over time. People always wonder if we have a cap where we say we're only going to identify a certain number of students. That is absolutely not the case. We come to the process with open eyes, and we just look at patterns when we're identifying students, and we look at the criteria. And so this year we were able to identify 8% of students as gifted learners. And of that 8%, 8.3% are English learners, and you can see that's up from last year. So each year, that number has been going up. And also the percent of socioeconomically disadvantaged students, we were able to identify 27% as well. And to put that in perspective for you, so you have a little bit more frame of reference, when you're looking at the district overall, right now this year, we have 14.9% of the students who are English learners, and we have 35.9% of all students district-wide who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. When you break that out into third grade, just looking at third grade, you can see those numbers shift a little bit. We're at 21% of English learner students, and 43% of our students are socioeconomically disadvantaged. When you look at all GATE, that means grades, the newly identified students, as well all the way up until 12th grade, even though they don't receive GATE services in high school, they're still counted as identified. You can see that the percentage of English learners is 7.3%, and the percent of socioeconomically disadvantaged students is 13.8%. And the reason is that most of the identification of those two groups has happened in the last 3 years, because we've made a concerted effort to improve the equity of the program. And so you can see that this year, those are the same data points that I called out earlier, the 8.3% and the 27% that we had talked about. Are there any questions about the identification numbers or the comparisons? No? Yes? Say that one more time, please. No, the testing wasn't changed. The screening measures are still the same. We instituted certain things like choosing to do an opt-out form so that we're getting a more diverse group of students. And then also the way we look at the data is a little bit different. So we look at students compared to like groups rather than just a one solid similar cut score. So it's how you look at the data, not changing the actual tests. Any other questions about the data? Yes.
Was it 3.5% socio? Is that 3.5 in the last column for last year?
Yes.
That's a huge jump.
Yes.
27%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Laura.
I just want to check. So is that the numbers, are they of
The identified students.
students who were screened?
Correct. The students who were identified. So that when you're looking at that number, that 8.3%, so when you take the number, 8% of students were identified, and of those 8% of students, 8.3% are English learners, and 27% are socioeconomically disadvantaged. And that's because that's representative of that group, so that you can see we're trying to get parity of the GATE population with the district demographics. And so if you look, we're still not there, but we are making inroads with how we identify the students, and that number should be shifting every year. You're welcome. Okay, and now I'm going to hand this over to Jennifer Larson.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. So the next couple of slides, I just want to give us a couple of minutes to look at how our GATE program looks over time. I know a lot of you are just entering our program, and I know there'll be some questions about what happens after elementary school. As you can see on here, all of our students are identified in 3rd and 4th grade, and that's what brings us here tonight. From here, you're going to make a choice of whether or not your students are going to move into a self-contained 4th or 5th grade classroom or a cluster 4th or 5th grade classroom. Regardless of which choice you make for 4th and 5th grade, when you go into middle school, your students will be moved into a cluster program. So both of our middle schools and our K-8 school do have a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade GATE cluster program. And we are clustering only in language arts and social studies. So once we move from elementary school, there is no self-contained classroom as there is in the 4th and 5th grade. So as I mentioned, they are clustered only in language arts and social studies, and this is part of why we only have a cluster program in the middle school. As students move into the middle school, they are attending a much more self-identified pathway. For example, their math will be identified based on their math skills. Their elective choices will be identified based on their interests. And because of that, we want to make sure that our students have opportunities to be in whichever classes most fit their independent needs. In language arts and social studies, it's the only place where our students are still cored together in middle school, and so that's where their GATE services are provided. Regardless of if they are in a GATE cluster or not, all teachers will be able to differentiate for multiple levels in the classrooms. Specifically in our GATE cluster classrooms, our teachers have the same training and work with the same trainer as our elementary GATE self-contained and cluster teachers. So they use similar models for their differentiation. But as many of you have seen in classrooms, for those of you who have been in the program, a lot of that looks like really good teaching. And so we know that those methods have also transferred into all of our classrooms, and our students are differentiated for well in all of the rooms. Last but not least, I just want to touch on another reason for doing that. Besides the individualization around math and their elective, it's also important when students move from elementary to middle school that they have an opportunity to be working in diverse groups. And so a lot of what we work on in middle school is socialization and how to adapt to different types of social situations, how to communicate and collaborate with different types of people, and they are offered that opportunity within the variety of classes they choose to take. Any questions about transitioning to middle school? Yeah.
Not precisely that, but.
Any question?
Okay, so I'm trying to get a handle on why I'm glad that we have the self-contained program.
Perfect.
Self-contained.
Yes.
But why, as I've done a deeper inquiry and spoke to Lisa Nyquist and my twins were with Kathy Cook, Ms. Kraft, Beth
Mhm.
Kraft, who said she used to teach 6th grade game.
Mhm.
I'm trying to figure out why there's been an attrition and then why do we hold on to 4th and 5th and just that? Is there something?
So I can answer
development?
I can answer a little bit of that. So the question was, why have we retreated from having a self-contained model in the middle school? But we do have it in elementary school. And I think there's a couple of different ways, and please add in anything that I'm missing. We've had a cluster in middle school for over 10 years. I taught when it was what I think we're considering a self-contained classroom. In that model, unfortunately, we rarely had a full class. And so what happened was it would be backfilled with either high achievers or parent recommendations. What that did is it created kind of a skewed enrollment, not only in that class, but a lot of the other classrooms as well. In addition, we often had classes where if it was overflow, you had one full class and then you had this small little cluster somewhere else. What we found was our students weren't being served as well as they could be if we were implementing a true cluster model. So it's been actually about 8 years, we decided tonight, that we moved away from that model in middle school. and just went to clusters. And that way we were able to train a lot more teachers in the differentiation strategies that were already happening in the self-contained classrooms. And I even kind of hesitate to call it a self-contained classroom because, like I said, it was a modified cluster, larger cluster, for many, many years. There was a strong community call for keeping the self-contained elementary because we do know that our students, especially in our younger years as they're developing, some of them really feel more comfortable in one environment or the other, and we wanted our families to have a choice. But we didn't see that same need in middle school. Is there anything else that you would add to that? Okay. Is there a follow-up question?
And also, Nevada's the only one in Marin that does it, so what, you know, I've heard that some of it has to do with, population density or.
Do you mean GATE in general? So there, years and years ago, funding was taken away for serving our gifted students. It was no longer considered one of the student groups, and therefore there is no funding for this service. Because of that, most districts let it go. We're committed to the program. We have a very strong program, and so we have continued to use general fund money to support it, even though we don't receive funding for it. It's one of the very few programs we offer that we don't receive funding for. So we do still offer it, and we do offer both because it meets the needs of our students.
And then under LCAP though, aren't districts supposed to post data, achievement data specifically for the program?
I'm going to let Julie answer that. She's in the middle of LCAP now.
The LCAP is specific to students that are English learning, foster youth, and low income. There's a certain area for special ed students that we consider, but gifted does not fall into that necessarily. The funding, in general, the LCAP, the full document itself, does ask that you include information on how you're serving all students, and your gifted students would be included in that. But we do not receive any specialized funding for gifted students whatsoever, yeah.
So that there's specific limitation on how gifted students within that data are being served, or
Um,
is it part of the report?
It is not a requirement. The requirement really is specific to those three student groups that I just named. Because what we do find is that our gifted populations in most every single district are outperforming the rest of the student body. They're not, you're not seeing the same achievement gaps. So the LCAP in itself is calling out funding for students that are historically being underserved by districts. So our gifted students generally are, doing quite well. So it's not a requirement in the LCAP. Yes.
I think the gifted kids are underserved, like maybe not necessarily in our district, but like across the nation, I would put them in that category. I think somebody said that they're the second largest dropout rate from high school.
So I'm speaking in very specific state terms in the way that students achieve in comparison to the rest of the student group. But I hear what you're saying. It's definitely a concern, and that's why we continue to serve students in a self-contained program, because clearly if you're a gifted student, you're going to outperform the rest of the student body. But I'm saying just for LCAP kind of accountability purposes, it is something that we're not required to report on, but we do maintain our program because you're very right on that across the nation it is an issue for students that are, identified as gifted. They do have some obstacles that other students don't have that we're very much aware of in our district, so. I think I saw one more hand. Yes.
With regards to the clustering at the middle school level, when you say that the kids that come out of I guess it's coming out of both the self-contained and the cluster classes, correct? They're all identified for middle school and
Do
clustered
that right there.
correctly, correct?
Which one?
That little,
Sorry, we've got.
now go
What do you
to
got?
present. See if it works.
There you go.
It might
Oh,
work.
okay. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Right, when you said that they're clustered in the language arts and social
Mhm.
studies classes, and that's the kids that come from the self-contained and the clusters,
Yes.
but they're not all in the same class.
Oh, fantastic question. Thank you. Yes, ideally, we keep our clusters at 6 to 8. So we would try to have a cluster of 6 to 8 students in each one of our GATE cluster classrooms. And like I said, we have multiple GATE cluster classrooms in language arts and social studies. Those are cored at each grade level. Typically, depending on enrollment, somewhere between 2 and 3 teachers who are serving those students. But again, we customize that for the number of students who are coming in. I think the other piece of that is just to understand part of the reason for that is we want to make sure that we are having enough students in the class that there is a group or a cluster that can work together that have some similar needs, but also we want to limit the range that the teacher is differentiating for. So by doing this, we can help the teacher really hone what they're doing in the classroom a little bit more specifically to the student needs. And so, like I said, 8 to 10. Again, with their math and their their math and their electives really drive their schedules. And so that's the reason we have so many clusters at a time. We need to make sure that there is a cluster class open for them any period of the day. Sometimes we have those maths that are singletons or electives. For example, if you're a band or a choir, they only happen once or twice a day, and that would be the priority. And so we need to make sure we have a GATE cluster happening every period. For GATE? So the GATE curriculum is the same. And so I want to make sure that we identify the difference between the services and the curriculum. GATE is not a different curriculum. All 4th graders have the same curriculum. It's the way that the instructor is differentiating. So for example, you may walk in and they may have what looks like a very similar activity going. The questioning strategies or the level of depth that one student is going into is vastly different than another. So it's not a different curriculum. It is not a different program. It is the way we are delivering and the expectations we have for the different groups of students. That means no busy work, and I would like to say, I would like to hope, not more work. Again, there is a common misconception that somehow more homework means harder, and that we know is not the case. And so we're going to have Karen come up, and she will talk specifically about what kinds of strategies you should hear in the classroom and things that you could be looking for. But yes. Yeah.
Please explain how you're going to differentiate math and science in the 6th grade specifically.
6th grade specifically. So math is going to be a level playing field at 6th grade. What we find is our students have a pretty big jump, a big hurdle going from 5th to 6th grade to begin with. In math, we have students coming into a pretty intensive CPM curriculum. And so all the students are in a 6th grade class. The teacher would differentiate like they would in every other classroom. The difference is in math that at the end of that year, there's a number of assessments the students take part in. And from there, they will branch out in different directions. So it becomes more personalized as they go. There's a regular 7th, there's a compacted 7th, there's a regular 8th, compacted 8th. Compacting meaning they're covering more material in a shorter amount of time. And so the math starts in the same place at 6th grade. The reason for that is because we know that there's a big learning curve into what is expected in a math classroom. There's a lot of group work, a lot of discourse, a lot of very high-level thinking questions and processing. It's not math facts. And so we know that all students, gifted or not, need to understand the kind of the foundations of that program. The other is we have a lot of students who are identified in GATE and not, who achieve in math in different ways. So all of our GATE students don't necessarily need that, and we have a lot of students that are not identified GATE who do need that accelerated pathway.
So what's the point?
Of what?
Can you give me some of the reasons for and against?
If you think that it's going to support your student, I think it's a personal choice. And I think that if you feel like your student is going to benefit from differentiation and working with a cluster of students who are similarly identified, then it would be a good choice for you. Yeah.
I was actually part of the GATE program.
Fantastic.
So I can tell you that this covers a lot of the questions you don't ask. Yes, I did. I dropped mine. But it wasn't because of them. It was because of you. I didn't have any support. So that's what you have to do.
Thank you.
It's 70-30. 70% your job, 30% his job. Our daughter, she gets very limited screen time. We talk to her teachers every day, and we do what they tell us to do, and we report back and forth. And every day she gets challenged. And that's the difference with the gay program. You go to the same class, but you have different challenges. I used to play races with my friends in that. So a final in algebra that was supposed to take us 2.5 hours, I took it in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That's the advantage. It helps you when you get to high school, so you can go to college better, so you can get admitted. I got a scholarship from the United States. Just like it said. It'll help you.
To the extent it would sound that you like that answer just a little bit. I think I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards about the gate program and how it benefited my program.
We should probably just have to see.
So
So we want to just make sure that we're able to move along with our presentation. So if we can support, we will have time that you can interact with each other, because I think to the gentleman's point back there is the parents have a big job on it, but also you guys are in a community now. If you're a newly identified gay parent, that you'll find support in some of your colleagues sitting here. So let's make sure that we're just moving along, so we are addressing some general questions from the group. And we do have some important updates that we want to give you. So if there are some other programmatic questions we can answer, let's do that now, and then we're going to move on. Yes?
this is not that, but I can speak to the inverse of somebody who didn't. And that it didn't
yeah.
include me at all.
So again, if we could possibly go to that at the end when we have some time to speak with the community. I think we're going to find opinions for all different aspects of this. Is there another program?
I just was talking to someone who's watching the feed and they can't hear anything that we're saying or
Oh,
what we are saying.
yeah, so we need to make sure that we're echoing questions.
Right there, that microphone, if people want to share their thoughts, just tap that button and it'll record your voices.
Okay, all right. There you go.
That's the last one. So one of the important messages that we wanted to make sure got out to you tonight is the impact of the recent budget cuts on the GATE program. So you've probably heard there's been a lot of messaging from the district around the budget cuts. And these are due to declining enrollment and some other factors, so we have some structural deficit going on. What that means for us is that we are cutting district office administrators, which is going to have an impact on our ability to support the GATE program from the central office. We are, as you've heard, we are dedicated to maintaining the self-contained program. So that will continue. We just probably will see less parent nights like this. We'll probably have to keep it down to 1 a year. We'll continue to have our instructional coaches to support our teachers, but we unfortunately won't be able to bring in our consultants to support the teachers directly in that way. The other change that we let our GATE leadership know, our GATE leadership team know, is that we will most likely disband that group pending the decision around going forward. We'll do our best because we are cutting about 20%, 35% of the district administrators that are working in the instruction department, so that does make a really big impact. We have a lot of things that are required of us due to compliance that we have to maintain. So again, we're committed to the self-contained program, but we wanted to make sure you did know that our ability to communicate in the same level that we have in the past is going to be impacted. The other change that is somewhat unrelated to this, because we do have a dual immersion program developing at Linwood. And so we know that there's a need in order to keep the complexity of that campus to a minimum, that we need to move the self-contained program from the Linwood campus. And pending board approval, we are going to move that self-contained program to Olive Elementary. And that's one of the reasons that we have Ms. Sesmic-Olenek here to speak to Olive Elementary School, who's going to be welcoming those self-contained classes at their school site. And we did work with our GATE leadership, and their suggestion and recommendation to us on how to support the current self-contained classes is to move both of those classes simultaneously, because those students in the 4th and 5th grade work really, quite a bit with each other, and the students themselves would provide the support that they need in that transition. If you're a new incoming parent, it would be, you wouldn't see a lot of difference in either it's at Linwood or Olive. We'll make the final determination pending board approval on when that will happen, but at this point, we're looking to do it next year, just so that the transition happens sooner than later, since it's going to be, the dual immersion program is slated to be implemented in the fall of 2018 as well. So in itself, the self-contained program won't change, but it will be located at Olive. And that also means that Elizabeth will be supporting the program from the Olive site, and there'll be less support generally from the central office. We, of course, will support her as best we can with our reduced staff. So, Elizabeth, do you want to come and say anything about the wonderful campus of Olive? Sure. Thank you.
Is the program definitely moving or not?
It will move.
I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Is
Yeah.
the program definitely moving in August of 2018 to Olive Elementary School?
It's not definite that it will happen in August 2018. It may happen either this coming fall or the following fall. We still have some final details to work out about that, so.
It's March, it's the end of March, and I'm just concerned as as a parent in the existing program at Linwood. I'm just wondering what can be done to hurry up the decision.
I think it's going to be made within a couple weeks, is what I understand. So that is all the information I have at this point. I'm sorry, but we also know that it's important to get the information out there sooner than later. But knowing that it will be at Olive Elementary either the fall of 2018 or the fall of 2019.
Hello.
Yeah.
So, okay, so what about for the parents that are trying to make a decision right now, the third grade parents, it's scary enough to think about moving their kids from their home school to a new school once, but it's pretty overwhelming right now to think of them moving twice.
Mm-hmm.
So is that decision is their timeline for answering going to coincide with that? I'm getting nervous.
Okay.
Or, I mean, are they going to be allowed time to absorb that information and make that choice? Are you extending the deadline for them to do that?
When is the deadline right now?
This Friday.
We hadn't talked about that internally, but one of the reasons that we were saying to try to make it this move this coming fall is for that reason. So parents didn't have to have their kids go to one school and then to the next school. I know that the input from the GATE leadership team, we took very seriously, because those are the parents that know the program, mentioned that really the biggest change is from homeschool to self-contained, and when students move from self-contained to self-contained, they felt that there would be not as much disruption. But our intent is to move it in the fall of 2018 to keep the disruption to the kids down to the minimum. I think the logistics that we're waiting on are pending board approval and then just a few other things. So I would say with good certainty that it would move to the Olive campus. And if there is some change to that, then we could consider extending the deadline. Yes. Yeah. Right now, I'd assume without any unforeseen thing happening, I'm assuming that we will get board approval. So we've tried to vet it as well as we can. I don't imagine that there is any reason not to move it. Olive has the space, as I understand it right now. It's just a matter of confirming that. So unfortunately, yeah, the timeline got a little scrunched because we also were making the decision around dual immersion, and that type of stuff was all going on at the same time. But I hope that we'll have an answer very soon. Yes.
I know it's a complicated series of decisions that you're making, and I do appreciate you trying to make it quickly here before people have their deadline, but I'm hoping that you can really seriously seriously consider extending the deadline to people. I've talked to a lot of parents who are, you know, there's a lot that goes into it other than just self-contained or cluster. It's like, can I get my kid to
Okay.
a different school across town and still make it work on
Do we see any
online?
issues?
So
Yeah.
if the deadline, once you make the decision, maybe the deadline could be pushed past that, and maybe if people have already submitted, they could be allowed to change if that's right for them, just so that people can make an educated decision with all the information.
So I would say if you're considering enrolling your child in the self-contained program, get in your paperwork by the 30th. Those people can then have the option, once they find out that it will be at Olive, if they want to switch out. They can, but it's really important for those people who I already have people who have submitted it. So I think that if you are interested in having your child go to the self-contained program, that you really should turn that paperwork in, and then you can always rescind it and move. So we will have that flexibility, but I think it's important to submit it by the 30th, and then we'll make changes based on the people who need it. Sorry.
Okay.
Are there, yes.
I have a question for principal.
Sure,
We understand that our kids will be self-contained, but will also be part of a larger campus at Olive. Could you tell us just quickly about the culture there and what you love about Olive?
I would love to. Okay. All right. Good evening. I'm so privileged to be here tonight. My name is Elizabeth Sesmolinik, and I've been the principal at Olive. This is my 5th year. Olive is a great little campus, and that has a lot of activities that are going on. It's a pretty unique campus in the fact that it has a lot of diverse population. We have 2 district special day class programs on our site. We have 2 county special day class programs on our site, in addition to our regular population, and they all mix together. And that's the beauty of Olive, is that we take all these diverse students from a lot of different activities and areas within Marin County and within our district, and they all become all of us. Okay? And that unique ability to bring all of our students together, I don't care where they come from and what they come with, we make them part of our school and our school culture. And one of the things I had the privilege of talking to my staff today about, because this was news to my staff today, that what Olive does best, what we've always done best, is welcome our families and welcome our students and make them part of our culture and support them and encourage them and envelop them into our school. And I have no worries that this will also be part of our welcoming to all of our new GATE families. So, any other questions for me? I know this is a big shock, and I know for some of you who might live as far as the Loma Verde area, it is a large commute. Olive is the northern east side of our boundaries. If you're not familiar with it, it's right down the street from Trader Joe's. You all know where Trader Joe's is, and just keep on going down the street. It's a great little community. I had today, let's see, my 4th graders were at Peter and the Wolf today, and my 5th graders were at the Sonoma County Watershed doing biology in the watershed. So we definitely believe in a lot of activities and inclusion and conversations. I'm thrilled to see our new teachers and welcome them and bring you guys into this conversation too. Yes.
I just wanted to attest to that because I have a little one who's in the county classroom,
Uh-huh.
K through 2, and they really have done so much to integrate my special needs son into the rest of the Olive community. They bring in 4th and 5th graders, and they have friendship clubs, and the kids just interact and play so well together. So I really want to thank you for
Right. Right, right. And every school has its unique culture. You know, every school in our district has a unique and viable culture, and they're gifted in their culture. And I want to let you know that part of the Olive culture is that inclusion and welcome. I'm sorry, there was a question over here.
I was gonna say, again, no one at home can hear anything that any of us are saying, so if you want to be heard by everyone else, you have to speak to the microphone.
Or repeat the question.
I will. I will. Any other questions? Oh, come on. You're gate parents. Come on, you can think of something. Yes.
Can we come over and take a tour and ask questions that are specific to our family?
Absolutely. The question was, can we come over and take a tour? Absolutely. This is a really busy time. Spring is crazy, but absolutely. If you would like to call me personally in my front office and take a tour, I'd be more than happy to give you a tour. Yes.
So there was recently the gate tour at Linwood, which was an organized event by the district. I'm just wondering if that's something that the district can organize, given that there's now this potentiality for the gate program to be at Olive, so parents can have a chance to come and check out the campus.
And I would say pending board approval, that conversation, I think it was a reasonable, viable conversation. Did you want to add something to that, too?
So as soon as we get board approval, we can look into arranging that.
Tomorrow?
No,
No.
it's not.
Tomorrow?
Next week.
Next week? Next Tuesday, the third, second, third. Yvonne's telling me 3. Yes. Yes. For Olive.
Shouldn't it then follow that you guys extend the deadline a little bit? It doesn't make sense to me. You're asking parents to commit to something that you want to change. To the microphone,
So the question was, once again, requesting to extend the timeline since there was already a tour at Linwood. Is that correct?
The enrollment
Okay.
for the other schools.
So I think that's a conversation for our panel here. I would be more than happy to do another parent tour for those families who would like it. If we could get a date that's common, I'd be more than happy to do that instead of doing, 27. One is much better than 27.
Yes.
I think well, my husband and I are concerned. We're thinking of moving to the self-contained, but we were told if we changed our minds, that the classroom, the gate cluster classroom, if it's filled at our neighborhood school, then we have to go to another neighborhood school. Right.
So that's, the question is if they put in their application for the self-contained and then decide to go cluster at their home school and that cluster is full. I would say that one might be problematic.
So that wouldn't happen at this point. Remember, the program itself is not going to change, and it's going to be the same teachers that will be providing the program at the new campus. If people need extended time, that's fine. Most people who know that they want their child in the self-contained program may go ahead and submit the form. But if anyone is feeling like they just can't commit at this point, that's fine as well. The due date is March 30th. I do understand that some people are uncomfortable with that. We can extend it by a week so that we can get that board approval and people can make that decision.
I haven't even sent up the Olive parent tour, so.
I think the point is, my point is, I think the deadline should be extended not just a week, but after the board meeting, but after parents can actually see the Olive campus on a GATE parents tour.
So here's the great thing is that the GATE teachers are going to continue their program, their self-contained program, at our site. What I think you're looking at is obviously a shift in location, and you're going to be looking at a shift of some activities or cultural activities. But if you're choosing a self-contained program, you're choosing that for those specific reasons, whether it's at Olive or Linwood or Loma or wherever in our school district. I think obviously there's some problematic issues with transportation that you obviously have to consider as a family. But if you're looking at that program of a GATE self-contained thing, that's where I would suggest your first conversation fall.
Can I say something? I think we should let these ladies finish their program. They have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
7 minutes left. These questions have been redundant for 25 minutes of Olive and Linwood and whatnot. It needs to be like that, but, and then this deadline questions can get answered after, because I'd like to hear about what to expect.
Thank you for that transition. So the other thing that I want to say is that a lot of this has changed for us. We are experiencing 2 of our administrators in our department not being here next year. And so that is one of the reasons that you're seeing some of this change and some of this confusion happening. So I'm going to put that in part of this context, and we're going to move on. If you do have questions about where to go with your child, then you can contact Michelle directly if you're concerned one way or another. So we're going to move into Karen's presentation. Thank you, Elizabeth. So that the parents that want to hear some of what the instruction looks like in the classrooms can learn about that.
I'll talk fast.
It's okay.
I can talk fast. So, good evening. I am blessed each time I come to be able to go into the classrooms and work one-on-one with the teachers. And that's wonderful for me because I get to see all the awesome things that are happening. I would start off by saying that if any program with GATE students is going to be successful, it's going to be successful because of communication. Communication is key. You have to be in communication with your child's teacher. You have to work as a team. Gifted learners struggle. GATE learners struggle. It's not an easy road for them, and I wish that it was, but it's not. They view the world differently. It's what makes them the learner that they are. And it's a wonderful view, but it can be a challenging view. So understand that making that connection with your child's teacher is critical. When we talk about that, it's an ongoing challenge. It's not something that goes away just because, well, okay, I met the teacher at the beginning of the year, or it's ongoing. And that communication is critical. It is a partnership. You need to share the child that you know, your learner. Understanding that that may not be the learner that the teacher sees in the classroom. Because oftentimes, I as a parent of a GATE child went in and they talked about this little boy who did all these things, and I'm thinking, okay, my son is Eric. He's about this big, and you're not describing my child. So understand that it may not be the same child. They may not represent in the same way. All the more reason for you to have that communication with them. Make that contact early. Make a list of your questions. What do you want to know? What do you need? Understand, transitions are challenging for GATE kids. They struggle with transition. And so the more you can present a calm front for them, even though you may be churning inside, the better it will be for them. That is very important. Understand time is a premium for teachers. If there were more hours in the day, we would be much better off. Unfortunately, there aren't more hours in the day. So use your time to your best advantage. Know what you want to talk about. Take advantage of the communication that the teacher offers, whether it's a web page, whether it's email communication, whether it's a message board that they've set up. Take advantage of those communication things. Remember that that teacher doesn't always see the child that you see at home. Teach your child to advocate for themselves. I cannot emphasize that enough. Your child needs to learn to advocate for themselves. You cannot follow them the rest of their lives. You don't want to follow them the rest of their lives. My oldest is 28. My youngest is 21. They have to learn to advocate for themselves. They have to learn to move on. Make your list. Narrow it down. Remember that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So take it one step at a time. But that partnership is really important. So I want to take just a minute to talk to you about today, tomorrow, and the next day, because those are the days that I get to be in the classrooms. And these are just a few pictures that I took of things that are happening in these classrooms. Michael Clay Thompson's 4-level grammar, which is a fabulous way to teach kids grammar and get them to truly understand what they're doing. When I was in school, grammar was what you got assigned when you messed up for the substitute. And you got grammar pages that you had to do, and I hated grammar. Kids in our GATE classrooms love grammar because it's a way to connect, and language makes sense for them, and that's very important. You have other pictures of kids learning Latin and Greek stems to understand how our language was developed. Kids working in collaborative groups, kids working on varying tasked activities. We talk a lot about that term rigor, and we say, we need a rigorous curriculum. Hate to tell you this, there's no such thing. Rigor does not come from a curriculum. Rigor comes from what the teacher does with that curriculum. I can take the most challenging curriculum and take the rigor right out of it by what I do with it. So if you're looking for a book or a worksheet or that will provide rigor, you're going to look a long time. Rigor comes from what the teacher does, what they have the students do with it. It comes from the questioning strategies. It comes from the differentiated tiered lessons that are put in place. So those are the kind of things that you want to see in that GATE classroom. And I got to see them today. Students working on a variety of different tasks. Students using depth and complexity. Kaplan's model of the different icons and understanding. So what's the language of the discipline? How am I using that? How am I looking at it through multiple perspectives? Those are all elements that are really important if you're going to connect with the brain of that GATE kid. I also met with teachers just sat down and talked about, and these were the questions that they had. How do I set up math learning contracts? How can I put those in place? So we got those questions answered. Other ways to use philosophical chairs, project-based learning. What do you think about, Karen, what do you think about if we took an interconnected and created activity and created that in a PBL? Will that work? So they're constantly looking for new ways to challenge and enrich these learners. Different ways to structure literature groups to really support the learning of that GATE students who doesn't need to read with the whole class, who needs to be able to go on and create their own golden rule comments. Creative ideas for critical reading, ways to assess using concept maps rather than that traditional test that really doesn't necessarily show you really what a GATE child understands. Different tools for argumentative writing. All of these things were discussed and a whole lot more. We had lots of really great conversations today. And the advantage of that is that these teachers get to feed off of each other. They get to come up with new ideas and brainstorm and use those things. Best practice. The strategies that we're talking about, they're not GATE strategies. They're best practice strategies. They don't damage any learner. They're good for all kids, but they're essential in a GATE classroom because they are what continue the motivation for GATE kids. Without these types of strategies, the kids lose their enthusiasm for learning, and it's not fun anymore for them. They don't get excited in the classroom. They need to be embedded throughout the day. They need to be embedded throughout the week. They can be subject specific. They can be whole group specific. And I'll be honest with you, I hear a lot of people say differentiation's not that hard. Then you haven't done it, because it's not easy. These teachers put in long, long hours trying to come up with how to structure this and how to build this and how to create this. It is very challenging, but they're willing to put in that time, and they're coming up with some awesome activities for the students. So one of the things that they're doing is Socratic Seminar and looking at teaching kids how to ask questions, how to continually move their thinking forward, and how to move the thinking of their classmates forward. One of the most beautiful things to see is to watch a teacher start a Socratic Seminar and then watch her back away. She backs out of the conversation and her children continue to engage in it and continue to move that Socratic thought process forward. That's what we're seeking. That's the push that we want to have. So we are moving forward, and the teachers are working very hard to provide the varied curriculum that your children are needing. Thank you. Okay, so I went 2 minutes over, sorry. I tried.
Okay, so that's the end of our formal program for tonight. We do want to welcome you guys to ask questions, or like you noticed, there's a lot of conversation that many of you might want to have or connect with each other. Feel free to take some time to do that before you head on home. Thank you so much for coming out this evening.